Welcome to Dungeon Brew. Today, Josh and I are going to be continuing our series on narrative design. Today, we're going to be discussing elements of world building in writing and TTRPGs. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Dungeon Brew.
All right, welcome back. Today, we are going to talk about system design of elements and world building. There is a lot to cover here, but let's start with you, Josh. Tell us why world building is important in system creation within narrative design.
Yeah, so if you've been watching our previous videos, we've been talking about the importance of system content, system creation, and how everything in your system should be reactive to what the characters are doing within the game setting, what their choices are. It should impact things. So in terms of world building, it's looking at all of the different elements of world building and making sure that there is the potentiality of them being impacted by the decisions that the characters are making during the course of the game. You don't want to have a stagnant world. I mean, that's really the bottom line. You're looking at change. If anything, I think the best way of thinking about this is just think of Newton's third law. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So when your characters are doing things, make sure that there is a reaction based on those decisions that are being made.
Yeah, if you're not sticking to, creating some kind of change as you go, dependent on what is happening around you, that's also going to pull you right out of that, the suspension of disbelief as well. If you're just following some kind of line, forward, making the story too linear, I think that's going to kind of make things a little boring and take your players or your readers right out of it.
Yeah, and we've all played those games where you like go into a tavern, you get into a brawl, everyone fights, someone dies, things get burned down and tipped over, and then like there's like a refresh of the screen, and suddenly like the barkeep's back behind the counter being like, all right, which one of my wares would you like to buy today? It's like, I just burnt down this bar, you son of a bitch. But it's like you want to make sure there's actually an impact. Now, John and I did an entire series on world building. So if you guys really want to get into the scopes of all of those things, I would say go look at that series. What Diana and I are going to do is kind of highlight some of those different elements and talk about how you may consider them changing in your system based on decisions that the character is making. You want me to start off with this, Diana?
Yes, you go first.
Okay, so the first one that you might talk about is geography. This is, of course, looking at your lands, maybe your weather, your topography within the world, and just recognizing that there are certain actions that might take place that would change the topography, the geography of the land. So let's say the characters are fighting alongside a mountain and they knock off a chunk of it and it falls down onto a major trade road. This may change trade routes and the way that things can occur in that area. Or they're at the base of a volcano and they're utilizing magic and shooting fireballs, and they cause some sort of disruption that causes that volcano to erupt. Or they burn down half of a forest. If they are doing something that's going to impact the world in terms of geography, make sure that you're reflecting that.
Yeah, I think that's also going to affect, geography is really actually going to also affect your characters and their own interactions as you're going as well. Like if you're, sitting in a desert having a meal with a, rich prince, you're not going to be sitting by a fire when the sun is the highest, because that geography is not going to allow for certain behaviors and, certain events to happen based on what it is that is surrounding them, based on their environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think another thing that we really need to look at is culture. There's a lot of culture that happens. I mean, there's culture, when you think of culture, you think of things, kind of on a bigger scale, but even towns have culture, depending on where, if your town is next to a lake, it's going to have a different kind of culture than a town that, once again, is going to be in a desert, because it's going to, have to do, or it's going to affect the people's sense of survival. It's going to, they're going to have maybe different gods depending on what it is, that they're, just all focused on, I guess, in their lifestyle, right? You have different religions. Religion, can affect culture. So, if your character is coming into a village that has, they're worshiping a specific god, and you come in dressed the wrong way. You come in, dressed, in like wearing signs or something of some god that they don't worship. That's going to create some frustrations there within the place that you're in, the people that you're surrounded with, that kind of thing. But or one city may have super high standards. So if your character is coming to a certain town, with certain behaviors or certain ways of dressing or speaking that are going to be offensive to that town because of their culture, I think that's one thing that can kind of create more of that sense of depth as you go.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be something offensive. I mean, if you think about just in our modern age in regards to like the country folk going into the city or the city folk coming out to the country and embedding themselves within that environment, you're bringing new ideas, new concepts, new ways of presenting information that can impact the way that things are being handled. And I like this topic because it really has a lot to do with why is it so important to have backstories for your characters? What does it mean when
Mm-hmm.
the rich aristocrat in the party comes to the little small town and shows them a better way of conducting their tax system to solve a problem that they've been experiencing, and how does that change the culture of that small town with that aristocrat in the party being there? So yeah, that's a
Mm-hmm.
that's a wonderful thing.
Good
Population is
point.
another one, and again, we're looking at what characters may do that impacts these world building elements. So population can be a little tricky to like work your mind around, but think about war taking place on the horizon between like the north and the south kingdoms, and there's an army that is burning down villages and running people out of their small towns up north. Your characters choose not to engage with that army because they want to go dungeon delving for a week first. So as a result, all these individuals that are being pulled out of their settlements, their farmhouses, are having to advance to the cities that are in the south and overrunning that city in terms of population. Now they're using food, they're bringing disease, utilizing resources, there's not enough housing for them, and it can impact the change within that city based on the decision that the characters had made. So being creative with population, I think, can be difficult. I've also been in games where there's like a plague that's taking place in a city, and recognizing if I'm not finding resources to combat that plague, medicine through the means of magic or technology to combat that, that's going to have a real impact on that settlement that I'm in and change the population and who it is that I can even contact. I'm sorry, you can't trade with the local merchant, or you can't go and speak to the governor anymore because they're dead because you didn't do anything when you were
Mm-hmm.
supposed to.
Yeah, maybe that dungeon delving has a dragon suddenly following you, and you take it to the village where you're staying and wipes out that village.
Yep.
You're gonna have a whole different chain of events, but and also a whole different outlook on what your next steps are going to be based on what you just destroyed because of the actions that you
And
took.
that village created all the barley that went up to the major part of the kingdom, so now they don't have food. Yeah, these are things you want to think about in terms of your world building.
Yeah, that's right. Magic is another one that I think is really it's a big thing. I mean, culture is big itself, but magic, it's super important to have your magic system down. Of course, if we as we've talked before, you have to consider how your magic is going to affect your world building as well. Going to affect your characters, going to affect the world around you, or how you're going to use your magic. Depending on what it is that or what actions you've taken. For example, if you have nature-based magic and you are, in a part of the world where, I'm trying to think of a specific example. Let's say you're like some, character that has specifically earth magic,
Mm-hmm.
but you are, in a very desolate place where there's, not the kind of element. That was an awful example. I think you get the point of what I'm trying to say. But having access to whatever it is that you need, depending on your magic system, of course. But I'm sure you have a more specific example on what what to think about with magic and world building.
You're right in the sense that you may be bringing maybe different schools of magic to regions of the world that are not familiar with them, that can impact their understanding of that. You may also be adventuring and questing and finding, occult-like spells that haven't been seen by the world, or maybe engagements with deities or demigods that are giving you access to magic that is beyond the scope of what the regular wizard can do within the school or within the world. And so those types of things too can have a major impact as you come in almost appearing to be some sort of demi-human in the way that you're utilizing magic that is just shocking people. Maybe you use your magic in that light to heal a bunch of people that are sick or wounded from battle, and it completely changes the scope of a war that allows to shift things. So yeah, there are different ways, but I like your example of I have a certain skill or school of magic that I've been taught, and now I've traveled to the East where they've never seen this before. And so now I've opened up a whole nother line of exploration in terms of magic that they never even thought was possible.
Yeah, and I
Your
think
Doctor
that's
Strange going to Tibet. Go ahead.
yeah, no, I think it's just one of those things that you also have to be really careful with as well, because I think you can really just kind of kind of just put a wrench in
Hmm.
the world building if you don't have your full magic system really hashed out from the very beginning.
Yeah, you have to make sure. I love that caveat that you want to make sure you're not breaking your world by
Yeah.
whatever reaction you have taking place. And this kind of fits in the same realm as technology. You want to have a limit and a scope of what you want to do with technology. There's certain things that you might be able to achieve. I know in the games that I play, we utilize a lot with poisons, and poisons being created and crafted, which in a sense is their own technology that can be kind of game changing. If I have a big bad guy that they're fighting, and I don't have any antidote to a poison that they're utilizing or any save to a poison, and they just paralyze him with a successful attack roll, I've just destroyed the game because there's no way for them to overcome that. So you want to think about what technology you're introducing and what characters are discovering in the course of technology
Hmm.
and what that's leading to. Are they creating powder bombs? Are they moving into a place of steampunk or diesel punk? How is this impacting the gameplay? What are they finding, and how is that changing your world landscape?
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning that technology could tie into culture as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I never actually really thought about this until as I was, sitting here looking at what it is that we have to we're talking about today. The biggest example of that, I think, is World of Warcraft, the gnomes and their technology. When you go to the gnomes and you see the like the way that they behave, they're kind of a little more
Mm-hmm.
erratic. They're a little more the way that they speak, they act. But I think that has just a lot to do, or it just kind of comes from their advancement in technology and the way that they function and the things that they're able to have because of that technology. But
Like look
I
at our
think
modern
I'll tie
world.
in.
Look at our youth today as opposed to 500 years ago, from we went from pushing a plow in the field to simply having a computer in our hands all the time. Now we're like like just constant 8-second attention spans instead of I
Exactly.
can toil this field for 9 hours and have nothing else going on.
That's right. All right, religion is the next thing we are going to be talking about. Now we can get into religion from all sorts of angles. Again, this is also going to tie into culture. It's going to tie into
Yeah.
maybe even magic a little bit, depending on what religion it is that your characters or the world around you, the village, the town, whatever around you is following you, or is following at the time. I mean, you have your dark gods, you have your light gods, you have your gods that don't give a crap. What was a Akram?
Mm-hmm.
That's probably one of my favorite ways, or my favorite non-caring gods
Mm-hmm.
because of, I mean, really from the movies more than from Conan, the game I talk about so much. But I think it's just there's so much room to be so creative around the religions and the gods and the goddesses. It's so much fun to play with there. What do you have to say as as the GM when it comes to TTRPGs and religion?
Those that know me well know that I'm obsessed with religion in and out of TTRPGs. I spend a lot of time looking at it. So it's always a major part of my game where my players are going and finding ancient religious texts, or they're engaging with ancient gods and bringing these things or revitalizing them back into the world again, which completely changes like the scope and the belief of how they perceive the afterlife, how they perceive magic, how they perceive worship and devout, and all these types of things. And it's funny you mentioned Conan, because right now I'm doing my Conan TTRPG with a group, and that's what they're battling with. They have sects around the world that are essentially engaging in ritualistic magic and seeking ancient stuff from the time of Atlantis to bring back old gods back into the world that have since been thought dead. And it's completely changing the landscape. It's bringing about disease and storms and all sorts of things as the gods battle in the cosmos, and the characters are making decisions that are choosing what gods are becoming more powerful and which ones are being weakened.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be really fun, and that's a fun way of looking at it, which kind of takes me into the cosmos and the planes. That's another aspect that I don't think we always consider. And to be fair, not every game, not every campaign really plays with cosmos and the planes. But if we look at things
Hmm.
like fifth edition D&D, or any D&D setting, there are multiple planes of existence: your astral plane, your ethereal plane, your mirror plane, your material plane. And think about what impact it has on the world that you had created when your characters start moving in and out of these planes. If they start traveling to the ethereal plane or the astral plane regularly through some magical device, are they bringing back demons hiding in their bag of holding that are now haunting the area? Are they bringing back an essence of that? What happens if they go to the realm of hells, of the seven hells, and they destroy one of the devils that are ruling over one of those planes? What impact does that then
Hmm.
have on the material plane or other planes that are now vying for power, or that are letting all chaos break loose because there's no one managing those demons and devils? So these types of things I
Hmm.
think are really fascinating to get into. I'm
Yeah,
rambling. I apologize.
there is so much that, I'm listening. I'm sitting here thinking like, holy crap, as a GM, there's so much to go into, so many layers of everything. I mean, I touch on a little bit, of cosmos and planes in my own writing, in my series. I have another realm. It's
Mm-hmm.
basically like the spirit realm where, you have your goddesses where they reside, where the main character isn't even allowed to go there until she reaches a certain level in
Mm-hmm.
her godhood. Because otherwise, the just time itself, time and space will crush her. And so it's just, little things like that. I'm like, just the little details that I put into my own writing for a different plane. It's crazy to think what different levels you can go to with so many different directions. It's like the freaking multiverse in TTRPGs.
Well, and with these two, to be fair, I mean, we can brainstorm about all the wonderful conceptualizations you can make, but as a GM, you do want to make sure you're setting up the story, which is what a
Yeah.
lot of these narrative design videos we've been making talks about: how you prepare players for the story, and you have a nice scope and sequence so they kind of know what to expect, or you're giving little tidbits of information that lead to the overall story, and you have that narrative thread that's going through. So it's not like, what, I went to the astral plane and now there's a demon in my bag of holding. How the hell did this happen? I didn't even know demons existed. Like, I have since put in the nuggets that tell you that demons exist
Hmm.
there and they like to attach to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like if you don't have it all kind of neatly packaged going into the game, then you're
Yeah.
just going to invite chaos, and it's not even the fun kind of chaos,
No, it's
because
not fun
chaos has its
chaos.
place. But
It's
no, it's
it's
not exactly
characters
fun.
going, what the hell's even happening right now? All right, go ahead.
All right, city life is next. Now, to be completely honest, I don't spend a whole lot of time in city life when it comes to my writing or my gaming. But I mean, city life is going to touch into, once again, everything: culture, religion, magic. Depending on what it is that you're doing in the city or what your characters are bringing to it. So I think I'll let you start with that, and I'm going to follow your lead and see where you're going with this one.
Well, you and I have spent a lot of time watching Game of Thrones lately, which I think sets up a really good example about how city life can be impacted by decisions that characters make. Spoiler alerts a little bit. I won't give you too much, but in regards to like the High Sparrow coming into power, now we have zealots that are moving through the city that are enforcing religious law in some way,
Hmm.
or you have a queen that's been placed into a position that's opening up the fighting pits, but this is now given rise to these fanatics that want the old way of rule that are now moving throughout the city. So when you're thinking about city life, you're thinking about what decisions are characters making in the course of like bringing people into power, eliminating
Hmm.
corruption, supporting certain factions within the city while trying to snuff out other ones, and how is that changing the balance of many things? And you're right, this does go across a wide variety of other areas: culture, economy, politics. But the decisions that they're making, how's that impacting the city? How's it impacting the day to
Hmm.
day? The trade that you see, how citizens are engaging with each other, the level of potential disruption that could lead to anarchy, versus people being happy and engaging in their cultures and
Hmm.
having celebrations and traditions that are taking place.
Yeah, and you don't want to forget the hierarchy of not just of power, but of status. The poor people as well, the
Mm-hmm.
people who are living in the slums, or who are just your lake people on the outskirts of the city. Just I think making sure to keep all the little details in there as well. But I'm pretty sure you just gave away what episode we left on last night.
Shh, no secrets. All right. Another one that we want to make sure that we cover too is economy, and this does play into it as well. But recognizing that the decisions that characters make can impact the economy. If they are going and saving certain individuals that are of prominence within a culture, could open up trade routes. It could make alliances between neighboring kingdoms, which could bring in more money. One of the ones that I really like to focus on is when your characters do accomplish major feats for a city, maybe for a king or a governor, and they pay them money out of the treasury. How is that going to impact the economy of that city? Did you just put that kingdom in debt? Are they now having to go borrow from a central bank in order to be able to feed their people? Are they having to make an alliance with another kingdom in order to get goods and things moved in because they can't afford the previous trade agreements that they had because they just gave you bukus of money in order to save the princess that was stolen by whatever? So understanding how the economy can be impacted by the character's engagement in the world, I think, is a paramount thing that can really lead to some interesting developments.
Yeah, and having this all, set up in the initial, creation of the world as well. If you're walking into a tavern, in a more, known city or something, they're going to serve different types of food. They're going to serve different
Mm-hmm.
amounts of food, versus if you're going through a poor town and, little family takes you in to let you rest and, kind of rejuvenate before you continue on your quest or something. But I think there was I was going back to that prince example that I was using before. If you're sitting in, the middle of a desert with a prince, how
Mm-hmm.
much are they going to actually be able to feed you? What are you going to expect? And also, what are you going to be eating? What's going to be, within reach? What is going to be considered high status food or, high status
Mm-hmm.
drink or items or whatever, depending on where you're at and the economy of that area.
Yeah, and all of those things are very important in terms of understanding what your basic world looks like before you even dive into it. And
Mm-hmm.
then, as we'll be talking about in the next video, in contingencies, which is what we're kind of talking about a little bit here, just kind of in a wild way, and looking at these examples. But it's when characters then make choices, how does it change those initial world building things you set up with? So knowing
Mm-hmm.
that you're in the desert with a prince and you're not going to build a fire and the food that's there is going to be more scarce, you're going to be different, etc., and so forth. What happens when you start engaging with that environment in a way that limits what's already there, or you maybe have
Mm-hmm.
invited a different type of creature or something within that environment that's changed the climate, the landscape, or something? And what does that mean for the game?
Yeah, because if you're sitting there eating mammoth with a prince, you better have that explained in a desert.
All right, you want to cover
um,
politics?
Politics is next. So, you got this. This is one of my favorite things to go into with just general fantasy, and writing and fantasy, narrative design around fantasy is recognizing, your kings, your queens, your princes, if that's the kind of world you're in, but recognizing and making sure that you keep in mind the level of power that they each have, and how that is going to be affected um, by your players as they go and as they
Mm-hmm.
interact.
Yeah, absolutely. And what choices are they making that's changing that system of power?
Mm-hmm.
If they murder a marshal or if they murder a prince,
Yeah.
like who's next in line? Did you just make the evil cousin, fourth generation down,
Mm-hmm.
three kingdoms over, in charge of this kingdom? What is
And
the
how's the
impact
town going
now?
to respond? Are
Yeah.
they, loving their politics, or are they, are they going to praise you and try to put you up in the seat next, after you
Mm-hmm.
wipe someone out?
And then the last one we want to talk about in this group to consider is going to be military and warfare. And I will be honest, this is the one that I am probably the most lenient around because I oftentimes have characters that say things and make decisions that should lead to war, and I don't go to that scope because I don't like large war scaled games most of the time. I like to keep things pretty focused with the players and individual missions. But are they doing things that's potentially causing warfare between kingdoms? Are they making decisions?
Mm-hmm.
Are they crossing lines or not following customs that are going to be acceptable or respected by individuals from place to place? Are they going and speaking as a diplomat or as some sort of medium between two different countries? And what does that mean when they don't say the right thing or do the right thing? Are we having a natural reaction take place that is equal to the action that is being chosen by the characters?
Yeah, but I think just having I mean, that kind of has to be full fleshed as well too. You have to know what types of things, depending on the culture or the person, that you're talking about, what types of things can put an end to warfare. What kind of things is going to start it off, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And to get more about like those NPC buildings and behaviors and attributes, we have made videos on that already within the series where you guys can kind of talk about how to flesh out those characters so you know how they react to characters' choices that are being made, which again is the full piece of this system creation. It's recognizing that everything within the system should respond to the choices that characters are making during the course of gameplay.
If you have enjoyed our content, don't forget to go and click like and subscribe. Leave a comment, but go ahead and click that bell so you can be notified of any future videos that we have coming out.
And we'll talk to you guys all next week when we look at contingencies in narrative design.
Judge and brew.